My name is Victoria, I'm 31 years old. For most of my life, I've been the dependable one in my family. Not the golden child, not the one who received the praise or the attention or the long, heartfelt birthday posts. That was always reserved for my younger brother, Artem. He was the golden boy, the miracle child, the one who got the smile while I got the lecture. I was the one who stayed late fixing things around the house, helped pay off the family car, and eventually took on the full mortgage when Dad lost his job and Mom's side hustle fizzled out. I never asked for recognition. I told myself I was doing what family does, you show up even when they don't applaud for you. Artem, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He flunked out of college twice, crashed 2 cars our parents bought for him, and somehow became a startup founder after convincing a few of our cousins to invest in an app that never made it past the login screen. Yet, every family dinner, every get-together, every group chat, he was the star. "We're so proud of Artem's vision," Dad would say. "He's just got that spark." Meanwhile, when I was promoted to senior project manager last year, my mom texted back, "Cool. Proud of you, good too," in 2 short lines, no emojis, but I didn't do things for recognition, right? That's what I told myself. Every time I covered another utility bill or when my dad casually handed me a pile of late notices and said, "You're good with this stuff." I swallowed it again and again until the wedding. Artem's wedding was a grand affair. Garden venue, twinkle lights everywhere, 5-tier cake, and a drone capturing the ceremony. I wasn't involved in any of the planning despite paying half the down payment for the venue, a fact Artem never acknowledged. And my parents brushed off with, "He's got a lot on his plate." I didn't push. I showed up, wore the expensive suit my mom picked out, smiled through the rehearsals, and even offered to help with last-minute logistics. On the day of the wedding, I arrived early to make sure everything was in place. It was warm, unusually warm for spring, but the breeze helped. Guests started arriving in waves, dressed to impress with fake smiles and clinking glasses. I kept mostly to myself, staying out of photos, drifting between the venue staff and seating charts. When it was finally time for the reception, I found my seat, table 9, tucked neatly at the back, right next to the kitchen entrance. I wasn't surprised. Artem's high school buddies and his fiancée's work friends had better tables. Even a random cousin I hadn't seen in 10 years had a seat closer to the main stage. Dinner was served. Speeches were made. The best man, Artem's college roommate, told stories that somehow made multiple DUIs sound like charming college mischief. Laughter erupted. Toasts followed. His fiancée's parents, her childhood friend, a slideshow of Artem as a toddler, a teenager, and now a groom. No mention of the time he maxed out our parents' emergency credit card or the fact that I loaned him $5,000 last year to keep his app alive. Then, Dad stood up. He held his glass, waited for the room to quiet down, and said with a smile I hadn't seen in years, "To my son, my only son." He paused. "Whoever truly made us proud." Applause. Loud, unfiltered applause. Even a whistle or two. I watched my mom's eyes light up. Her cheeks flushed from the wine and the moment. My uncle patted me on the back, half sympathetic, half awkward, as if to say, "Yeah, that was rough." I sat there, silent, while the clapping stretched just a little too long. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. I felt the weight in my bag press against my leg. The folder I'd been carrying for weeks, maybe months, I'm not sure why I brought it that day. Maybe part of me already knew. The applause died down. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed, but inside me, something cracked. I stood up slowly, not fast, not dramatic, just enough that people noticed. The chatter around my table quieted. A few heads turned. Artem saw me and smiled like he expected a hug or maybe a toast of my own. I didn't look at him. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin, neatly stapled set of documents, the deed to the house my parents lived in. The one I'd been paying for every month for nearly 4 years. My name on every line. The mortgage and my name. Their names nowhere. I held it like a prop. No need to wave it. No need to explain. I just spoke calmly, loud enough for the mic to pick up since I hadn't been given one. "Then he can start paying the mortgage starting tomorrow," I said. "Because I'm done." That's when the room fell silent. Every clink, every whisper, every bite of salad paused in the air. Artem's fiancée blinked, confused. Dad's smile twitched. Mom slowly lowered her glass. The DJ looked at me, unsure whether to cue the next track or wait for the fallout. I didn't wait for a response. I placed the papers on the edge of the stage, turned, and walked out through the same kitchen door I'd sat beside all night. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I heard nothing behind me. No footsteps, no apologies, just the sound of a party realizing the ground beneath it had started to shift. And that was only the beginning. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, watching the lights from the reception hall flicker through the trees. Occasionally, I'd see silhouettes of people drifting by the window, glasses in hand, heads together in hushed conversation. I could only imagine the chaos I'd left behind. I imagined Mom frantically trying to smooth things over with guests. Dad fuming in silence, trying not to make a scene. And Artem? I imagined him stunned, humiliated, maybe even angry. But the truth is, I didn't care anymore. For so long, I had bent over backward to be seen, to be acknowledged. Not praised, just seen. I thought being the dependable one would eventually earn me a seat at the table, maybe even a shred of respect. Instead, I'd been taken for granted. I was the bank account, the spare pair of hands, the backup plan. And now? Now I was done. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls. 6 from my mom, 4 from my dad, 1 from Artem, and the rest from numbers I didn't recognize, probably aunts and uncles trying to mediate. My voicemail was full. I didn't listen. Not yet. I knew what they would say. That wasn't the time or place, Victoria. You ruined your brother's wedding. You embarrassed the family. Couldn't you have waited? Funny how no one had ever told Dad to wait before making that toast. Around noon, I finally picked up when Artem called again. There was no, hey. No, how are you? Just, what was that last night? I leaned against the counter, coffee in hand, and said plainly, it was me setting boundaries. There was a pause on his end, then a low laugh. You couldn't just let me have one moment? You've had every moment, I replied. Every birthday, every celebration, every pat on the back. I've been covering for this family while you played pretend CEO, and they still treat me like a placeholder. I didn't ask you to pay the mortgage, he said. No, I replied, but they sure expected someone to. And guess who it always was? He went quiet again. I could hear him breathing on the other end, heavy and agitated. I don't even own the house, he said eventually. Why would you dump that on me? Because I'm not your safety net anymore, Artem. If you're the only child they're proud of, then congrats. Take the whole package. Let's see how proud they are when you're the one taking the calls from the bank. I hung up before he could respond. Later that day, my mom showed up at my apartment. I wasn't going to let her in at first, but something in her voice caught me off guard. She sounded not angry, not self-righteous, just tired. Victoria, she said through the door, please, just a few minutes. I opened it. She stepped inside slowly, unsure of the welcome. She didn't look like the woman from the night before, glowing in champagne, silk, and diamond earrings. Now she looked small, wrinkled, like someone had let all the air out of her. She sat on the edge of the couch, folding her hands in her lap. I stayed standing. You embarrassed us, she said quietly. I nodded. So did Dad, but I doubt anyone called him out. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. That toast wasn't meant to hurt you, but it did. Silence. She looked down at her hands, then up at me again. We never asked you to carry so much. No, I said. But you never told me to stop either. You just kept taking. And you made it very clear who mattered and who didn't. She blinked rapidly. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, defensiveness, or both. We never meant to make you feel like you were disposable. Well, you did, I cut in. Repeatedly. And now I'm just making sure the roles match the rewards. If Artem's your pride and joy, he can figure out the bills, the maintenance, the insurance. Her shoulders slumped. Victoria, we can't afford that house without you. I shrugged. Then maybe you shouldn't have spent so long pretending I didn't matter. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her, like she was searching for the beautiful daughter who would cave with just a few tears and a guilt trip. But that version of me had left the reception hall the night before and wasn't coming back. I'm not trying to hurt you, I added after a moment. But I can't keep hurting myself to keep everyone else comfortable. She didn't respond. She just sat there for a long time, quiet. Eventually, she stood and walked to the door. You really won't help? I've helped enough, I said. She nodded once. No hug, no apology. Just walked out. The fallout came quickly after that. Dad sent a text that started with, "You ungrateful?" And I stopped reading. My aunt left a long voicemail accusing me of tearing the family apart. A cousin messaged me on Instagram asking if it was all just for drama. And Artem? Artem didn't call again. Not that week. Not the week after. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space. I had finally claimed it for myself. Of course, the situation at the house wouldn't stay quiet for long. And when the first letter from the bank arrived at their door, everything changed. The letter came certified, the kind you have to sign for. According to a mutual cousin who still floated between both camps, Mom had answered the door in her robe and nearly dropped the envelope when she saw the return address, the mortgage lender. She'd never received one of those before because I'd always handled them quietly, automatically. She opened it at the kitchen table where Dad was nursing his usual morning coffee. And when she realized what it was, a past due notice with a 30-day deadline to pay or face foreclosure proceedings, she nearly dropped her mug. That afternoon, I got a text. Just 2 words, please call. I didn't respond. The next day, it was longer. Victoria, we didn't realize the loan was that serious. We thought you had it on autopay. We just need help until your father's pension review clears. Can we meet? That one I didn't even open. By the end of the week, they were showing up again. Not just calls, but unexpected knocks. I saw them once through the peephole, both standing there like a pair of school kids waiting outside the principal's office. Mom had her arms folded tightly across her chest. And Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in just 7 days. I didn't answer, not out of cruelty. I had nothing left to say. The house was their responsibility now. I had sent a clean transfer of all documents, formally removing my involvement and legal liability. The bank accepted it. Artem, despite his panic, had signed off on it after his bride insisted they not let some family squabble ruin their honeymoon plans. According to the grapevine, she didn't know the full financial picture yet. And while they scrambled to fix the mess they'd never bothered to understand, I began rebuilding my own peace. I went to work. I saw friends I hadn't had time for in months. I finally booked a weekend trip I'd been putting off. I started sleeping through the night without that gnawing guilt of wondering which of my family's problems would show up on my doorstep next. But the silence didn't last forever. One night, 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a knock I didn't expect. Not my parents, not Artem. It was her. Emily, Artem's new wife. She stood there in a tan coat, her dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, her eyes sharp and clear, but her voice brittle. I just need 5 minutes, she said. Please. I stepped aside. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked in like she had a mission. Not the kind filled with drama or accusations, but the kind where someone's putting together the final pieces of a puzzle and doesn't like what they see. I didn't know, she started, standing stiff in the middle of my living room. About the house, about what you were paying, any of it. I waited. Adam told me your reaction was over the top, that you were jealous or upset about the toast, but something about it didn't sit right. So, I dug. She pulled out her phone and held it up. I found payment records in the shared email folder he forgot to lock down. You've been covering the house for years. Bills, repairs, taxes, all of it. I nodded once. No point denying it. He said, your name was just there for security purposes, but your name's the only one on the title. Again, I said nothing. Her arms dropped to her sides. What is wrong with them? I wasn't sure if she was talking about my family or the fact that she'd married into it. She finally sat down, eyes distant. You know, we were planning to move into that house. I raised an eyebrow. The house my parents live in. She nodded. After the honeymoon, Artem said it would be temporary, just until our new place was finished. Said it was all arranged, that the house was ours now. She laughed once bitterly. Guess that's how it works in his world. People just give him things. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. He's never had to earn anything. And as long as people keep cleaning up behind him, he never will. She looked up at me, sharper now. So, what happens next? If they don't pay, they lose the house, I said. The bank takes it. Unless someone steps in, you're not going to. It wasn't a question. I shook my head. No, I already stepped in for too long. This isn't mine to fix anymore. She stared down at her hands for a while, then stood. I'll figure something out, she said. I didn't marry into this mess to live in someone else's lie. And just before she left, she paused at the door and added, I'm sorry. For what it's worth, you deserved better. I watched her walk back to her car, her shoulders squared, but her steps heavy. It wasn't the apology I'd waited years for, but it was the first moment of genuine acknowledgement I'd ever gotten from someone in that family. 3 days later, the second letter arrived. This one wasn't a warning. It was a notice of default. And that's when everything began to unravel fast. The notice of default hit like a wrecking ball. From what I later heard, it arrived on a Wednesday morning. Mom opened it first and screamed. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but the kind of scream that comes from realizing something real and irreversible is happening. Dad read the letter 3 times and still didn't believe it. Artem. He apparently thought it was bluff. That the bank was just threatening to shake some money loose. But the bank wasn't bluffing. 30 days. That's what the notice said. 30 days to settle the overdue balance or the house would be auctioned off. That gave them 4 weeks to come up with nearly $18,000, late fees included. And no, calling me wasn't an option. The desperation started slow. First came the group texts. Hey family, if anyone can chip in to help mom and dad, they're going through a tough time. Then the personal ones. Victoria, I know you're mad, but can we talk? Please don't do this to us. We can make it right. Just give us a chance. I ignored everyone, but not because I wanted revenge. Not anymore. I'd already gotten my moment at the wedding, at the table, when I drew the line. This? This was simply consequences playing catch up. Eventually, they started calling everyone else. Extended family, friends, neighbors, even an old church group Dad hadn't spoken to in years. They tried starting a GoFundMe, but people weren't as eager to open their wallets as they had hoped. Especially not when some of those people had seen the wedding photos, the expensive venue, the tailored suits, the full open bar, the fireworks during the first dance. That display had burned through whatever goodwill they had left. With 2 weeks to go, Emily showed up again. This time, she looked tired. Not unkempt, not disheveled, just worn, like someone who'd been putting out fires non-stop and was running out of water. They're begging me to ask you, she said. They won't stop. They think if I push hard enough, you'll cave. And you? I asked, she sighed. I told them I wouldn't. That I already tried once and you were clear. I nodded slowly. Thanks. But I also wanted to warn you, she added. Adam's unraveling. He's blaming you. Of course, says you sabotaged the family. That you planned this. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, and maybe she saw the exhaustion in my eyes, the kind you carry after a lifetime of being treated like a background character in your own story. She hesitated, then said, for what it's worth, I'm thinking about leaving. That caught me off guard. Not because of the house, she clarified. But because of him. I'm starting to realize I married someone who has no idea how to take responsibility for anything. I didn't try to convince her one way or the other. That wasn't my place. But something in her tone told me it wasn't an empty threat. She was already halfway out. The 30 days passed. No miracle arrived. No last-minute wire transfer. No sudden inheritance or benefactor or we'll pay you back, we promise scheme that worked. On a rainy Monday morning, a sheriff's deputy taped the notice to the front door. The auction was scheduled for the following week. That's when everything snapped. I was at work, knee-deep in a budget meeting, when my phone lit up. Call after call from my parents, then Artem, then Emily. I silenced all of them. That evening, though, I made a mistake. I answered one. It was Mom. Her voice came through the speaker like a whisper drenched in static. Victoria, we're being kicked out. I didn't say anything. They're saying we have to leave. That the house isn't ours anymore. That's what foreclosure means, I replied evenly. We didn't think it would go this far, she said. Her voice cracked. We have nowhere to go. I closed my eyes, leaned back in my chair. You have a son you're proud of. Maybe he'll figure it out. She broke down, crying. I didn't hang up, but I didn't comfort her either. For once, I let her feel all of it. The fallout came in waves. The house was sold at auction for far less than it was worth, enough to cover the debt, but barely. My parents had to vacate within 72 hours. They moved in with my aunt, who wasn't thrilled about it. Artem and Emily tried staying with her too, but she had no room and even less patience. Emily left him a week later. She called me again after it happened. I didn't want it to end this way, she said. But he couldn't. Stop pointing fingers. Never once at himself. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. He said he never wanted that house anyway. She added that it was cursed. I almost laughed at that point. 2 months passed. Then 3. My parents tried to contact me again. This time, it wasn't begging. It was guilt. Cards in the mail, voicemails. With holiday greetings. An email from Dad that just said, we miss you. We didn't appreciate you like we should have. We were wrong. But I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I was finally at peace. And in peace, sometimes the only way to stay there is to let go of the people who only show up when they need something. The next spring, I bought a new place. Smaller, quieter. Mine. No one knew the address. I threw a little housewarming party. Just a few close friends, coworkers, people who'd actually shown up for me. No strings, no manipulation, no guilt. As we sat out on the patio with a small fire pit glowing between us, one of them asked, do your parents know you got a new place? I took a sip of my drink and said, they'll find out eventually. Pause. And when they do, I looked up at the stars. Thought of the years I'd spent chasing their approval. Of the dinners where my name was barely spoken, of the night I finally chose myself. When they do, I said, it won't change anything. And it didn't, because I was no longer the safety net, no longer the background character, no longer the one carrying the weight for everyone else. I was just Victoria. And that finally was enough. As the months went by, life began to feel lighter. I settled into my new space. It was smaller, yes, but it was mine. I could leave my things where I wanted. I could let the quiet surround me without feeling guilty for it. I started to enjoy the little things that I'd been too busy for before. Quiet weekends, spontaneous trips, catching up with friends who had become more like family than my own, but even in the peace, the silence wasn't always comfortable. It was a silence that followed me from the family, from Artem's wedding, from all those years of being the reliable one. And sometimes, in the stillness of the night, it felt like the weight was still there, the pressure of expectations that were never truly mine to carry. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after the wedding, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Emily. She was standing by the produce section, sorting through some tomatoes, her expression distant, but the moment she saw me, her face softened. She gave a small, tentative smile. "Victoria," she said, her voice almost apologetic. "I didn't think I'd see you here." I nodded, glancing around. "Yeah, I come here often now." I grabbed a cucumber off the shelf, trying to seem casual. She hesitated, then spoke again. "I wanted to thank you for everything you did, for standing up for yourself. I know it wasn't easy, but it made me think. It made me see things I didn't see before." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You're welcome. But I don't think I did it for anyone but myself." She shifted, glancing at her hands. "I'm thinking of leaving Artem," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's not the man I thought he was. I don't know how I missed it." I stood there, frozen, for a moment. Part of me wanted to tell her it wasn't too late, that she deserved better, but I wasn't sure if I was the person to say that anymore. I had fought so hard for my own peace, for my own freedom from the mess they had created, and part of me felt like stepping back into that chaos would undo everything I had built, but the other part of me, the part that remembered the woman who had stepped into my apartment, the one who had apologized, knew that maybe, just maybe, she was telling me the truth this time. "You deserve more than this," I said quietly, looking her in the eye. "But it's your choice to make, Emily. I can't tell you what to do." She nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I think I've been waiting for permission to choose myself. And hearing you, it's made me realize I don't need anyone's approval but my own." I gave her a faint smile. "Good. That's the only approval you should be seeking." After that, I left the store with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't relief, exactly, but something close to it. Maybe it was the satisfaction of knowing I hadn't been wrong to walk away, that I hadn't been selfish in choosing myself. Maybe it was the realization that in letting go, I had made space for something better, for me. A week later, Emily reached out again. She had moved out. Artem was furious, but Emily was standing firm. She said she couldn't keep playing a role in a family that didn't see her. I didn't offer advice this time. I just listened. It wasn't until months later, after the dust had settled and I had truly carved out a life of my own, that I realized just how much I had changed. Not just in the way I viewed my family, but in how I viewed myself. I wasn't just someone who fixed things for others anymore. I wasn't the one who picked up the pieces. I wasn't the one who stayed late, kept things together, and kept quiet when my efforts were ignored. I was someone who could stand up, even when it hurt. I could say no without feeling guilty. I had learned to be enough for myself, and that had to be enough for everyone else too. And when my parents called again, months after Emily had left Artem and I had moved on, they were no longer demanding. They were apologizing. They were trying to understand. But I didn't need them to understand me anymore. I didn't need them to see the worth I'd been chasing for years. The last time I spoke to them, I didn't give in. I didn't fix the problem. I just said what I needed to say, and that was enough. "I'm glad you're trying," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm not coming back. I've moved on. And I'm happy." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking for their approval. I was content with the silence that came after. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was mine. Months passed, and I continued to settle into my new life, embracing the quiet and the autonomy I'd fought for. I stopped waiting for the call, the apology, the recognition. Slowly, I realized that it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone to come around. I had built something for myself, and it was finally enough. One evening, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The stars were barely visible through the haze of the streetlights, but it didn't matter. The world felt vast, but in that moment, it felt small enough for me to control. I had friends now, real friends, people who didn't need me to fix anything. People who didn't have expectations of me beyond simple companionship. I learned to appreciate their presence for what it was, genuine and unburdened by obligation, and yet, even in my peace, I couldn't entirely shake the weight of my past. The lingering thoughts of my family still visited me, like unwelcome echoes. In a quiet room, I couldn't ignore that part of me that had always been the fixer, the one who kept everything together. But now, I saw it for what it was, a role I had outgrown. It no longer served me. One weekend, I decided to take a trip. A getaway I'd been planning for months but had put off due to work and life. I packed a bag and headed out of town to a small cottage by the lake, somewhere quiet and remote. The drive was long, but it felt freeing. The further I went, the lighter I felt. It was as if the miles between me and my past were closing the door on all the years of responsibility and emotional weight I'd carried. When I arrived, the cottage was exactly what I needed. Peaceful, serene, and free from anything that demanded my attention. I spent the next few days wandering through the woods, reading by the fire, and letting the stillness fill the spaces in my heart that had once been occupied by others' needs. On the third day, as I sat by the lake, I received a text. It was from Emily. I'm doing it. I'm leaving him for good. I don't think I can ever go back to that life. But thank you, for showing me that I didn't have to settle, that I had a choice. I smiled at the message, the weight of my own experiences reflected in her words. Maybe she was still finding her way, but she was learning to walk without someone else's approval too. That night, I sat by the fire, letting the crackling wood fill the silence. I reflected on all that had happened. All the years of being the one who gave, who sacrificed, who never asked for anything in return. But now, I was the one who chose to be happy on my own terms. The one who was no longer afraid of choosing herself, even if it meant leaving others behind, and that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could ever give myself. The days in the cottage came to an end far too quickly. On my drive back home, I reflected on how much had changed. I wasn't the same person who had walked away from the wedding months ago. I wasn't even the same person who had left the family behind. I had finally become someone who put herself first, and in doing so, I had found the peace I'd been longing for. When I arrived back in the city, I walked into my apartment with a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. Everything was still. There was no rush, no pressure. I took a deep breath, knowing that I had earned this peace, and that it was mine to keep. That I didn't need to go back. I didn't need to fix anything. I had fixed myself. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. As time went on, the echoes of my past grew quieter, replaced by a calm that I hadn't known was possible. I settled into my routine, content with the choices I had made, proud of the person I had become. The family I had once tried so hard to please no longer held power over me, and in that freedom, I found a peace I had been searching for my whole life. I still thought about them sometimes, about my parents, Artem, the life I had left behind. But the thoughts no longer carried the weight of regret or longing. I had learned that sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is let go of those who never really saw you for who you were. And in letting go, I had found something far more valuable, myself. The quiet became my companion, and it no longer felt like a void. It was full of possibility, of space to grow, to breathe, and to live. No more expectations. No more responsibilities. Just me, living my life on my terms, and that, in the end, was enough.